Disclosure decisions and confidentiality. When do you need to disclose? What information should you disclose? What happens when your condition is found out accidentally? And confidentiality and the need to know who in the workplace really needs to know what. When to disclose. When you need to request an accommodation, your employee is entitled to know you have a disability with certain impacts that require accommodation or that could use accommodation. So you have to disclose that you have a disability, depending on how your doctor and you discuss it and wish to frame it. That just has to say you have a disability. It doesn't have to identify the specific. And it does need to identify the impacts you want to be accommodated, whether it's fatigue or it's a back issue that requires a sit-stand workstation, fatigue that might require breaks. The documentation would need, your disclosure would need to say, I have a disability, it impacts my energy level, I need a break once every 3 hours. It impacts my ability to sit or stand for extended periods of time, so I need a sit-stand workstation. That's the kind of information that has to be there. If your disability is apparent, and people assume, perhaps accurately, that you have a disability at that point, your employer is not obligated to assume what accommodations you would need and make some guesses. They might proactively share with you, we have a process, here's who to talk to, do you need anything? But other than that, they are largely supposed to ignore that apparent disability, that accidental disclosure. That might also happen if you participate in a fundraiser that gets posted to Facebook or other social media where people assume because of that connection that you have a disability. As I said, you need a general statement that you have a disability and you need to describe the impacts of that statement, but you don't have to provide all of the details of your medical condition. You don't even have to provide diagnostic information. You have to provide kind of functional impact information. So you have a disability, it impacts and limits a major life activity of some sort, and here are the impacts that are relevant to the workplace. Once you disclose, if it's accidental, as I said, your employer's obligation is not to act on that in inappropriate ways. They're not obligated to make assumptions about what you might need. You would still need to make a request there. Accidental disclosure, apparent disability, and reasonable accommodations all can be seen and observed at some level by everybody that works for you. So if you have that sit-stand workstation, if you get breaks because of fatigue, and those are not in place for everybody, some of your colleagues will ask you, why do you get to take a break? Or they may complain to the boss. Joe gets to take a break. Why can't I take a break? Why don't I get a sit-stand workstation? So you need to think through on a social level how you're going to share that with your colleagues in the workplace. The employer, in good practice, would only say something along the lines of, I work with every individual in the workplace based on their needs. If you have needs, I'm happy to talk about your needs, but I'm not going to discuss another employee's needs with you any more than I will discuss your needs with another employee. So it'd be your decision of how much personal information to share amongst your colleagues in the workplace. But if they can see things, they're going to be curious about them. And when you don't satisfy their curiosity at some level, that can be uncomfortable in the workplace. Sometimes emergency medical personnel may need to know a little more information depending on the nature of your workplace. So at OSU, we're big. We have our own first responders. We may share some additional information with their dispatch unit so that if there's an emergency where you work, they're prepared to handle your particular needs if it relates to how to evacuate or what to do in the case of an emergency. Typically, your supervisor, a manager, a shop steward, someone is going to need to know that you're being accommodated to implement those accommodations. But they only need to know that an accommodation has been approved, this is how it should work. They don't need to know much information about your actual condition. Medical information should be kept in a separate file from your general personnel folder, not made general information around the workplace, not shared with other employees by the supervisor who's implementing the accommodations, beyond that basic statement about things that are noticeable, unless you've given them guidance on what it is you think is appropriate for them to share.